The Plymouth GTX, a name that evokes memories of muscle cars in their purest form, stands as one of the most iconic vehicles in automotive history. Introduced by the Plymouth division of Chrysler in 1967, the GTX was originally a high-performance version of the Plymouth Belvedere. What started as a trim package quickly evolved into a car that symbolized power, speed, and aggressive styling, appealing to a generation that craved raw, unadulterated performance. The first Plymouth GTX was part of a competitive landscape where automakers were vying for supremacy in the muscle car market. Chrysler, which had already established itself with powerful vehicles like the Dodge Charger and the Plymouth Barracuda, sought to create a car that could dominate both the streets and the strip. The GTX was designed to meet this challenge. The car's clean lines, bold styling, and powerful engine options made it stand out in an era where car culture was booming. Plymouth's strategy was simple: offer a car that delivered big block power with an emphasis on performance, comfort, and luxury. Under the hood, the 1967 Plymouth GTX was a force to be reckoned with. The car featured a standard 440 cubic inch V8 engine that churned out 375 horsepower. This engine, coupled with a 4-barrel carburetor, could propel the GTX from 0 to 60 mph in under 6 seconds. For enthusiasts seeking even more power, Plymouth offered an optional 426 Hemi engine, which was a legend in its own right. With its 425 horsepower, the 426 Hemi was a behemoth that delivered unparalleled acceleration and top-end speed. This engine made the GTX not just a muscle car, but a serious competitor on the drag strip, where the power-to-weight ratio proved to be an advantage over its rivals. The car's design matched its performance. The GTX featured a long, aggressive hood, flared wheel arches, and a wide stance that signaled its muscle car credentials. The design was clean, yet bold, with a distinctive front grille and twin headlights that became a trademark for the model. Inside, the GTX offered a combination of luxury and sportiness. The dashboard was driver-fenkered, with a center-mount tachometer and all the necessary performance gauges. The interior was upholstered in high-quality materials, making it not just a car for racing, but a car for those who appreciated comfort and style. Despite its strong performance, the Plymouth GTX wasn't just about speed. It also aimed to provide a balanced driving experience. The car's suspension was tuned for both straight-line acceleration and cornering stability, giving it a level of handling that was rare among muscle cars of the era. The GTX's combination of performance and comfort made it a versatile vehicle, capable of being both a daily driver and a weekend warrior at the drag strip. The early success of the GTX led to its continued production through the 1970s, although its role and design would evolve over time. In 1968, the GTX was restyled, receiving a more sculptured front end with a new grille and revised rear end, which gave it a more aggressive and refined look. For 1970, the car's performance options expanded even further with the introduction of a 446-pack engine, which included 3 2-barrel carburetors. This engine was capable of producing 390 horsepower, which made the GTX even more potent than before. It was clear that Plymouth wanted the GTX to remain competitive in a market that was becoming increasingly more focused on performance. However, the 1970s brought about changes in the automotive landscape. The muscle car era, which had reached its peak in the late 1960s and early 1970s, began to wane due to rising insurance rates, increasing government regulations, and fuel crises. As a result, muscle cars like the GTX saw a decline in production and performance. By the time the 1971 model year arrived, the GTX's exterior styling had been toned down, and its performance had been reduced in response to these pressures. The introduction of new federal safety standards and stricter emissions regulations further impacted the model's performance capabilities. The GTX underwent another transformation in 1972 when it was no longer a standalone model. Instead, it became an option package for the Plymouth Roadrunner, a decision that reflected the changing dynamics of the muscle car market. While the Roadrunner was still considered a muscle car, the GTX's performance-oriented identity was being diluted. As the years went on, the GTX was phased out, and by 1974, Plymouth had discontinued the nameplate altogether. The legacy of the Plymouth GTX, however, would live on. Despite its relatively short production run, the car remains a beloved icon among muscle car enthusiasts and collectors. Its aggressive styling, potent performance, and combination of luxury and power left an indelible mark on the automotive world. Classic car auctions and collector car markets continue to see strong interest in the GTX, with well-preserved examples fetching impressive prices. The 1967 to 1971 models are particularly coveted, as they represent the pinnacle of muscle car design and engineering. What made the GTX stand out was not just its raw power, but the way it captured the spirit of the era. The late 1960s and early 1970s were a time of great cultural change, and the muscle car became a symbol of rebellion, freedom, and Americana. The Plymouth GTX, with its rawhide power and striking design, embodied these ideals. It wasn't just a car, it was a statement. Today, the GTX holds a special place in the hearts of car enthusiasts who appreciate the golden age of American muscle. Its place in history is secure, as it continues to be celebrated in car shows, muscle car clubs, and online communities. The legacy of the Plymouth GTX reminds us of a time when cars were more than just transportation. They were a form of self-expression, a reflection of the boldness and aspirations of a generation.